Oh yeah, you always record. Of course. Go. Hi guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. It's me, Steve Hall, and on the other end is Pascal Floor. We're just chatting about how one another are feeling and something I've recently been experiencing, less so this week, but still somewhat present, and something Pascal is experiencing. I call it like levels of diet fatigue, and this is one of those, hopefully one of those levels you don't really experience until you're a bit deeper into a diet, and that's irritability. Yeah. So yeah, let the listeners know what happened this morning, maybe.
Yeah, I was just an arsehole. Plain and simple. So I went to the gym. It's my 4th week of this mesocycle. So I was feeling, I'm actually feeling very, very good overall. That must be noted. And I don't really feel super overreached as well. So yesterday when I had a rest day, I was like, I'm actually looking very much forward to go to training tomorrow. And that is a rare thing when you're deep into a cutting phase now, and also then deep into a mesocycle as well. But I went to the gym, and there are so many staff members every time, and due to the regulations now with COVID, you always need to actually check in with your chip. But the thing is that it's a new gym, and my chip doesn't work there. So I always have to say, hey, I have a split contract, so I can train in both facilities, but the chip doesn't work. And it was the owner there, and he was just a replacement for someone who got sick, and that's why he never has seen me in the past. And I had it so often already that I stood there, I explained the situation, and I then said, like, I'm in this system already, so go check my name. And it was right in the morning. The computer was actually just like, what is it again? Uploading or starting, right? And I was standing there. I said, like, I'm from the other gym. I can't really check in. My name is in the system. Go and check this out. I'm going to actually get dressed now for the session, and then I'm coming back to you. And he said, I can't let you into the gym. And I got so pissed because of that, because it's so annoying that it's always happening on a repetitive basis, because there's always someone else behind the desk. And it's just, it's not a big deal if you really think about it, right? Not a big deal. And I snapped, and I was just like very aggressive, and had to then apologize, because he then came back to me saying, like, why are you so aggressive? Why are you now... I wasn't shouting, but why are you just having that aggressive undertone and stuff like that? And yeah, I then needed to apologize. And I apologized like 3 times because I realized how inappropriate that was. But that I could have said, like, I'm dieting, but that doesn't make anything better for the person on the other end, because they're not in your shoes. And it's also, I don't think, a valid reason to snap. Dieting is your decision.
Yeah.
So you also have to take responsibility for being then in that position, and you have to control yourself even more so than before.
Yeah, I think so. I hope a lot of people will be able to relate to that. At least I can definitely relate to it, where, yeah, little things just irritate me much more than they used to. And I find myself, it's actually great that you can be reflective on it, and you can realize that it's inappropriate at times, because I think at least definitely when I earlier dieted, I couldn't.
It was super hard though, in the moment, to calm down immediately and apologize. It was super hard for me. When he then said, like, why are you so aggressive? Why? I actually then had to breathe in and apologize. But at the same time, I still kept on going, right? Saying how annoyed I am that it continues to happen. And when I actually then took my 1 to 2 minutes afterwards, I realized how fucking stupid that behavior was. Just because I couldn't go to train in that minute, I snapped. I could have easily waited for like 1 minute. Yeah. What's the big deal, right? And yeah, it's freaking inappropriate behavior, and I'm quite embarrassed about it, to be honest. Yeah. And I was quite embarrassed afterwards when I told him, like, I'm super sorry, this isn't me normally, and I really feel embarrassed, and that's why I wanted to apologize another time.
Yeah, I think I have had it, and it's hard because at times I don't think I am being, because when you're in the moment, you're just, I don't know, it's not something like, you're being inappropriate because you feel, it's the way you feel, like it's uncontrollable. It's just when you diet and you get leaner, you are just a more irritable person. So if you don't realize that because you've dieted before and you realize, this doesn't irritate me anymore or something. I can remember my first prep, 2014, people I worked with at the gym I worked at, they were like, Steve, I didn't think you liked me. I like, yeah, you're a different person now. You're eating more food. Like, you're way more chilled and like talkative and like nice. And I was like, hey, that was my first experience of it. And now I find myself at times, it's mostly Charlotte because I spend most of my kind of time with her, where I have to like reflect and be like, sorry if I over apologize now. She's like, oh no. Sometimes she's like, oh no, you were fine. But other times she's like, yeah, you're a bit testy. And when she goes, yeah, you're a bit testy, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, was I really, fuck's sake? God damn it. Like, the only way I could relate it to her. And like you said there, this is something we're choosing to do. I've chosen to do this competition prep. If I get irritable, that's like on me, not on other people. The only thing I could relate it to is for females, like, and I know this is probably a bit of a taboo subject, but when they're on, like, it's that time of the month, Charlotte knows she gets more irritable, but she actually can't control that because that's like hormonal. Well, ours is also hormonal, but she's not choosing to have a menstrual cycle, really. No. That's something that just nature has chosen for her. So I was like, when like that happens, she's like, oh, that makes sense, because she knows when it's that time of month, she does get more irritable. And I have to accept it, and that's hard. But in our situation, we have to kind of try and make up for it.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, short-term physiological changes that then have an impact on everything else, the way that you behave, the way that you feel, and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, it's just a normal thing in a dieting phase, especially when you're dieting for longer. And some people can control it a little bit better based on their temper overall. And for me, I was just, it was inappropriate. That is something that I definitely realized, and I can feel also here at home that there are certain situations where I'm not as relaxed as I've been in the past, and I have to be careful, because for me it's not about stepping on stage or so. I just want to lose weight. And especially then, right? I think that in a contest prep, you're already having a responsibility to take even more so care about your environment. I think it's like you said, it's on you to watch out and look out for other people around you. It's not up to them to take care of you then. But especially when you're just starting for nothing else, then there is, I think, no valid reason for you to snap because of the diet against others.
Yeah. This is why sometimes with my like comp prep athletes, I'll ask like, how are your relationships? Maybe it's worthwhile just like in the last couple of months, just buy your girlfriend or your husband or whatever, just like a gift, just like randomly. So like, I know I did it maybe a month ago, I bought Charlotte flowers. So I'm like, maybe I'll do that again. Just proactively, like dropping in like little things you can do to just kind of sweeten the blow a little bit, because it can be annoying, but she kind of knows it. And I also was getting annoyed because I was like, part of me was like not wanting to have diet fatigue. I was like, no, like this prep is meant to be like the most normal prep, and I've defeated diet fatigue somehow because it was like a egoistic thing. She was like, just accept it. Like, this is part of the process. Like, just accept you've got these new things coming in, and if you're feeling it, just be like, cool, right, it's part of the process. And when she kind of said it to me like that, I was like, actually, like competitors want to feel elements of diet fatigue. They're like, it's not hard enough. I was like, if I'm fighting the elements of diet fatigue, now they're catching me despite everything I'm doing. That's kind of comforting. I know I'm getting into those like body fat stores that really my body doesn't want me to get rid of. So that was quite cool.
The good thing is, though, that my mom-in-law, she saw me after 3 weeks now, and she actually said like, hey, Pascal, have you lost another bunch of weight? And I was just like, yes, I did.
Nice.
Looking good, Pascal. And because normally it's always like, man, you look sick. When people are approaching you and you're dieting and stuff, because they just know you with a little bit more of a chubbier face, which always suggests that you are healthier, right? And this time she actually complimented me, so that's a positive thing. Yeah, and I'm still not that lean, where it's like...
You are quite lean, though.
Are you all right?
Let the listeners know where you're at.
Yeah, 76 kilograms is where I'm hovering right now. I had a couple of weigh-ins, though, in the 75s, which is very, very cool. But that has already started like 1.5 weeks ago. And now, since the last couple of days, I've always hovered around 76, has jumped up again. But I also had the feeling that my digestion actually slowed down quite substantially over the past couple of weeks. Well, at least there happened something on that end. This is something that we've talked about in the past. One of the negative adaptations that are taking place is that your digestive system is slowing down to be able to preserve energy and also extract more nutrients and micro and macronutrients from the nutrition that you're ingesting. And I have the feeling that this is now really where my digestion has slowed down substantially, because no matter what it is that I'm eating, I always have like a grumbling stomach afterwards. And it's not like that I'm hungry or so, and it's not that I'm abusing or eating way too much fibrous food or voluminous foods. I can promise you that, because I did it in the past. I know what it's like. But it's just I'm eating something, and I have to be very careful with what I'm eating, because otherwise I'm just like, getting that uncomfortable sensation where I'm then ending up also having a lot of farting, a lot of gassiness sensation, and those farts, they don't really smell nice anymore. Sorry for the details, but I think it's important to put it out there, because I think that many, many listeners may be able to relate to that sensation as well, and talking about it helps them putting things in perspective as well. And that's where I'm at right now, where it's like a couple of times at the end of the day, in a gaining phase or in a maintenance phase for a very long time, I had no issues with gassiness, where it's like Katie has hardly ever experienced that I was farting, which is, in now the time that we are together, quite a surprise. I think she only caught me once or twice, and that was while I was asleep. And right now, over the past days, I was always like, oh shit, hey. I'm getting kind of stomach cramps, because the only thing that we are not doing in front of each other is kind of farting. So I was always like holding back up to the point where I'm already getting stomach cramps and stuff. I could let it out, but I don't want to. I still want to preserve what the image, right? Yeah, I'm going down a rabbit hole that I can't really escape anymore.
I was good. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I could probably map out like someone's poop frequency per day and know where they are in terms of like cutting, maintenance, and how deep they are. Because I know on a mass, like, it's a high frequency. Let's put it that way. Whereas on a cut, I'm fairly regular at the moment, but I've had clients who are in prep, and it's like maybe every couple of days they're passing like a number 2, because it does slow down dramatically, especially if you're not eating that much total food. And I know your food isn't super, like, it's not that high at the moment, is it?
No, absolutely not. And yeah, I mean, I'm still going to the toilet like each and every single day. It's not that it has slowed down like that substantially. But at the same time, when I'm at a maintenance or gaining phase, it could easily be that I'm going to the toilet like 2 to 3 times. So there is quite a big difference anyway. And then you just feed it in the way that you're digesting stuff. It's very, very hard to put it across. This is one of those things that you have or need to experience yourself in order to know what the other guy is talking about. Because I can see that people may be listening and they don't know what I'm referring to. And it's very, very weird. I'm not eating particularly different, and still I'm digesting the food differently right now. I can just feel it. And I know basing things off of feeling is never a good idea, but I brought up the example with potatoes, how I'm digesting potatoes right after a cutting phase, for example, transitioning into a maintenance or gaining phase. I'm getting very, very, I'm very gassy then for like 2 weeks, and then afterwards I can eat as many potatoes as I want, easy, without any kind of issues. And there's probably also the other way around, where it's just like some of the things that you're eating in a gaining phase that are absolutely all right to be digested at some point they may not work for you anymore. And this is in particularly important for someone like you at the moment in regards to the peak week.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a perfect kind of addendum to the peak week, because like people will be that they maybe haven't even like really used many refeeds. They're on low carbs. Maybe they even deplete and then they just chuck in a bunch of food. Maybe they even chuck in some new foods they haven't had, like potato. And it's like suddenly, I mean, that has a lot of potassium with it as well, puts your electrolytes out of balance. Your body's not used to assimilating and digesting that many carbohydrates. And you just look shitty, where you're like, oh, but I thought the rapid backload or whatever approach you take is meant to be like the best thing ever. And it's like, well, only in the right context and if you've practiced it and things like this. And yeah, that's why I'm particularly right now in my peak week, and I'm using what Dr. Joe would call the progressive linear load. And I'm really appreciating that component of it, where you can actually eat much more like your regular diet. And so the variable there is so much more limited, because I'm not eating thousands of grams of carbohydrate in a small period of a small window. It's like, it's just slightly more. So my meals can look very, very similar, just have a little bit more of it, keep my fiber under control. I'm not required, because I think for me, if I was to do a rapid backload, I'd be one of those people that need like 1,000 grams of carbs just because of the amount that I am requiring now. So it's nice, especially because I'm again, I talk about people taking into consider not just physiology, but also psychology. My psychology is someone who is a more anxious, stressful person. So if I can have a whole kind of slow approach to this, that also is another big plus. But also the plus to the progressive linear load is you slowly get used to having a bit more. So every day your metabolism might upregulate a little bit more. You might be better at digesting, assimilating, providing those enzymes. You might need a little bit more, so you could get a bit more fullness, like built every day. So yeah, In
the past, you've talked a couple of times about like different approaches to the peak week, and also you just recorded a voice message to me about like your realization of what more so works for you, but also naturals in general. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, so I think it's a bit of a tricky one, but I think a lot of people, when there's a lot of variables that come into peak week that people maybe don't really realize the practical implications of those until it comes to the period of time that you're doing it. So it's, well, obviously, so like salt, electrolytes, your potassium intake, your carbohydrate intake, your carbohydrate sources, protein, fats, your training, what are you doing with that, your kind of cardio expenditure, your steps, all of those variables. There's so many things, water, obviously, fluids. There's so many things you could change and manipulate. And the more and more I do coach people through it, and the more I do it myself, the more I realize if you actually want to be able to control how the person looks, you really have to keep as many variables under control as possible. And Dr. Joe talks about it a lot in terms of like homeostasis. And if you're like pulling water, doing something with sodium, doing something with carbs, and you're moving in every which direction, and maybe you're even depleting, swinging down, then swinging back up, it's just a lot of fluctuation. The body doesn't like extremes. And for some people, I definitely can see it working. Obviously, it does work for Cliff Wilson. He's done it with lots of clients. But the more people I work with, the more I'm convinced that it's just an unnecessary. Maybe I will change my mind in future, but I find it to be, for most people, at least we work with, where they're a lot of the time first timers, or it's their first like evidence-based contest prep, where they're truly like everything's dialed in. I just find that if we can get them ready in time, a much less stressful approach is to utilize just a carbohydrate change. And I know the recent paper, and we had Scott Stevenson on the podcast. I appreciate that kind of perspective, and I think there was so much good information in there. But sometimes I'm concerned that someone evidence-based would look at that and they were just like, okay, this is the way to do it. Like, it's a paper, it's in PubMed. This is the way I must manipulate fats. I must manipulate water, sodium, try and have diuresis towards the end of the week and change all these different variables. And ultimately, unless you've done that lots and lots and lots of times and on yourself, I just could see that being someone screwing that up so easily. And it's already hard enough as an online coach, trying to communicate all these things, making sure you don't leave anything out, that I could just see something going wrong and array with that. And I imagine someone like Scott, who has tons of experience, can nail it. But I think a lot of people, if they were like, oh, like this is the way, I could see it being very difficult. And also within there, they don't say this is the way. They are like, you don't have to manipulate water. You don't have to do this part. You can just do this part, which I think is great. But I just worry that a lot of people won't read that and they skip over it and they think, oh, I must have so many intramuscular triglycerides that if I don't fill out with 100 grams of fats for 3 days, I'm going to look like a skinny little bitch. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Thing is, what many people don't really think about or consider is you only have that many peak weeks in your entire lifting career. Especially as a natural athlete, I don't expect you to compete every single year, which may be possible for someone who's enhanced because you can make such rapid progression even in a short off season of like only 6 months or so. But for natural athletes, definitely not possible, right? Maybe you are someone who's in the sport for like 20 years and then you still keep on competing in the 40s or so. But still, it must be said, the amount of peak weeks that you're going through is limited. And thus, the amount of peak weeks that you then have time to experiment is also limited, because I don't think that anyone is interested in looking absolutely garbage on stage, right? And that's why you have to be super careful. Do you really want to risk it just for the sake of experimenting? I'm a big fan of experimentation, but the risk reward, especially in a peak week, is very much in favor of not risking things, in my opinion, but keep being, I think Eric Hems even said it at some point, I rather want you to be 95% full rather than 105% spilled, kind of, right? And there's some truth to that. I rather don't want people to mess around with too many things. It's like, I don't know, building something in your home. You've never done it. You are doing it for the first time. Are you expecting that for the first time you will nail it and that it's going to be a very, very solid piece? I don't know, whatever it is, a cupboard or so. You're building a cupboard yourself for the first time. Does it have the same standard as someone who did it professionally? Very unlikely, right? And how often do you need to go through that process in order to make a very, very solid cupboard? It looks like a cupboard, it stands, but is it great? Probably unlikely, right? And that's why not actually get someone who has gone through it like dozens of times, who then can guide you through it, or not risk it and just buy one product, for example, just as an anecdote. I don't know if it was the best one.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of the Revive Stronger member site. Inside you'll find a thriving forum, a growing exercise library, presentations, research reviews, and courses. If you want to get involved, sign up via the description. Yeah, I think it's the way I always look at it is the common said thing is to appreciate from a peak week, you need to look shredded at the start. You need to look stage ready. And it's like, if you look really great a week out, do you really want to risk a lot of things to go, like it's Jeff Alberts always puts it as the week not to fuck up. Do you really want to fuck it up? Because trust, like just deloading, having a stress reducing week, having really quality sleep, having a little bit more carbs in the system, you're already looking substantially like improved from what was already a really good look. So do we need to go to the extremes at the end of that? And I think particularly for a natural, when naturals say they're holding on to fluids and water, I'm like, okay, so reduce stress. Once you've reduced stress, you've probably got rid of all the water you're holding on to. Realistically, as a natural, we're not doing anything funny with hormones. So then it's only fat that you have left. So if you're shredded, we can reduce the fluid retention just through stress reduction. And then we don't have huge amounts of fat to worry about in our muscles. And that just complicates that peaking process a little bit more due to if you haven't been having a lot of fat in your diet and you suddenly plug in 100 grams of fat. I know if I ate 100 grams of fat today, my stomach would just be like, what the fuck is all this? Like you slow down digestion a ton to then swing up to then going low fat and into lots of carbohydrates. Again, I would have to practice that for someone for it to be worth it. And like a lot of people know, like how many people are truly crazy shredded at this point? Not many. So how much practicing and pulling away from the process do you really want to do? Not a lot. So you probably mostly rely on refeeds, where you are practicing more of a carbohydrate load and looking at when someone looks their best for that and what they digest well. And sure, you could try like a fat load, I guess, on one of those refeeds if you wanted to, see how that goes. I just think also the peak week is in itself a unique week where you can have practiced lots and lots of things, but I can tell you this, your psychology is different in peak week. You don't think like a normal week, and you shouldn't, because I find myself this week, especially as I'm getting deeper into it. At the start, it's kind of fun. It's like, oh, I'm eating a bit more carbs. But now I'm midweek, I'm like, fuck, I just want to push for more leanness. I just want to like push hard. I want to train hard. I don't want to relax. So I worry that, yeah. And you obviously get anxiety as the show comes closer. And so it's just, I really like to rely on minimal changes and variables. And I like the idea that if you do just slowly taper up carbs, you could potentially actually increase the amount that you can take in, and you can really see your limit and then hold it. And it's like, oh, you're just managing the look and the carbs. And it's like, as long as you keep your sodium, your fluid, your food sources in a good place, and you don't go crazy with your training, it's actually a really like, it's a kind of fail safe, and you're very guaranteed to get to that 98, 99%. And I think the 100% is kind of elusive, and it's a one shot kind of punt where you're like, is it going to work? Isn't it going to work? Yeah. So yeah, that's at least where my philosophies lie at the moment. I'm still happy to be convinced otherwise. Maybe I will because after this show, assuming I qualify, I'm going to say I'm going to qualify for finals. I think I should qualify for UK DFBA finals. Like, I'm very confident I will, but I might not.
When are the finals of the UK DFBA? I didn't check because I was very much focusing on the WMBF this year.
Yeah. They're in about I think they're in 6 weeks after this one.
Okay.
So yeah, 6 weeks on like Sunday, I think is when they are.
Midst to end of October.
Yeah. So I think it's 2 weeks before the WMBF.
Yeah.
So I'll have 8 weeks and 6 weeks to potentially have time to practice some of this stuff. Or maybe I won't even need to, because I can just diet hard for 3 weeks, finally get those details in from the rear, and slowly, progressively build my calories up, which is the goal, into these shows. So then I don't have to even, like, I can just be kind of that perma-peaked kind of ideal look. And this is where kind of Alberto is really coming from, where he's like, this is going to be the future of natural bodybuilding, where you don't have to even rely on a peak week, because you've kind of done a bodybuilding taper, as he calls it, I think, where you're slowly building calories up. So you're always looking like pretty good. You don't have to worry as much about it. And at that point, you've had a long time to build your metabolic rate up, to build your capacity to store carbohydrates, assimilate, digest carbs. And so like your potato example is great, because now, like, after 2 weeks, now you're no longer bloated, you're just tighter, fuller, whatever. And I think a lot of people, if they've got lean after a diet and you start building in more carbs for a couple of weeks, you'll just look better and better. And then you start softening up, especially if you take it a bit slower and not rebound crazy.
Yeah, I just want to say, if you unless you are like the vast majority of people, just slack off completely, regaining a lot of kilograms and also pounds, and then you just, after like 1 week or 2 weeks, you're already saying like, oh, my look, I'm much more softer now.
It's also individual, which is why the refeeds can be great, because for me, I tend to just take on carbs really, really well. And I think that's part of my adaptive metabolism. Whereas it might be different for you, because you've had quite different, like, you're not as adaptive to me. You're kind of a bit more slow and steady. Again, which the progressive linear load would work nicely in that way as well.
I have no idea though, because the thing is, I haven't been below 75 kilograms in like, I can't even recall, Steve. I think 2014 or so. So I don't know what it's like when I'm going down to 70 kilograms. So the plan is, of course, okay, I told you, but I didn't really tell the audience. The plan is to continue to diet up until the WMBF UK. No particular reason for it. It's not that I'm stepping on stage or so. It's just like, I think it's a good date. It's one of the last shows for everyone. I'm following along. That gives me a deadline. It also then aligns with when I'm coming over to the UK. Steve and I are going to do some recordings. And also, what kind of motivates me, Steve, is back in 2017, when we started working together, came over to London. We've both been dieting, and we took some pictures. And we both were very much smaller back then. And I would like us to take some pictures together again and just compare them.
Yeah.
With how we both looked besides each other back then. So I'm not expecting to be bigger than you, that's for sure. But in the sense of like, I'm bigger than back then, and maybe also more conditioned, and same goes for you. And then you can just demonstrate to our audience and also to ourselves, like how far you've come, how far we've come in just 4 years of a time frame, which doesn't really sound like a lot, but it can be a lot if you really dedicate the time to it.
Yeah, thinking back to that, I can remember being in Soho Gym in Clapham and having that training session. And
and I was borrowing your 3D MJ stringer.
Yes.
And so
I think some like guy came up to us and was like, because I think I had Damien maybe was filming us, one of my clients at the time. And he was like, "Are you doing like a bodybuilding documentary?" Because we were like posing in the mirror and stuff together.
Yeah, man. And looking back at those pictures, I'm just like, man, I had no muscle mass whatsoever. What was I thinking of actually stepping on stage?
I think it's a hard one because you don't know. I think sometimes you don't realize your potential for bodybuilding till you hit the poses really well. And you're that lean, because I am sometimes surprised by guys who maybe don't even have that much muscle, but they have shape and they have good posing. And I'm like, wow, like you have so much potential. Whereas, I mean, back then, neither of us have been gifted the genetic card of amazing shape and like structure. So you needed some more off seasons.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. No, but I'm very much looking forward to that. And that's also why I'm right now, I just want to continue that dieting phase up until like October time, just to also then see for us, it's more like for us to see how far we've come. And that's going to be very exciting to then see those pictures as well and have the journey of a Revive documented there. That's going to be amazing.
It is really nice, actually. I found this. Every time I prep, I end up looking more at other people who are prepping and dieting. And it's nice having people like doing the same. It's like, it makes it a bit easier because you're like, oh, you're going through the same thing as me. And it's quite like, it's nice knowing even that you're dieting till then. Because I'm like, well, I can't fuck up because Pascal's not going to fuck up till that point. Not that I'm expecting to fuck up, but that's probably going to be the hardest stretch for me, is that 6 weeks. Because the weeks after the UK FBA, there's so many shows close by that it won't be a problem. But I just need to like put blinkers on during those 6 weeks where it's just like, right, this is where you're bringing that crazy condition you've never seen in your life. If I can, like, we'll have to see, because it is one of those where you could, I think, diet yourself. Like you could keep dieting, you're never going to get a Brett Freeman glute shot.
That's true. That's true. No, absolutely. Can see that. No, but it's going to be exciting, especially like over October, the shows that are going to take place. A couple of my athletes are also going to compete at the GmbF here in Germany, for example. Then also other shows, of course, like INBA in Romania. Unfortunately, no one anymore in the WMBF, but hey, that's even better, because then I can just focus on you and cheering you on, and just enjoying the time there. And it's going to be a very, very, very cool time over October, and also just finally to come over to UK again. It has been such a long time. It's insane to think about it, that it has been now 1.5 years basically since I was over the last time. That's crazy.
With the GmbF, I think Arne may be doing the GmbF, the same one.
I think so.
Where is it?
It's in Bad Frolingen. It's not that far away from. Oh, not that far away. It's 3.5 hours drive from me, which is good because it could have easily been on the other side of Germany where I'm then, I don't know, traveling like 6-7 hours or so. And this way I'm just renting a car, so a proper car, because taxes and all that kind of stuff, right? So I'm getting a good car, driving over there, enjoying the shows, supporting my athletes, and then driving back home again. And then also Arnie is there, so very, very cool to see him there as well. So if you want me to take care of him as well, so let me know.
This is another point I was going to say. Not that I want this to be like a full peaking podcast, but on show day itself, I think a lot of people inappropriately put too much focus on the food they're eating that day. And it can be challenging if you've changed a lot of variables that you're not sure what, and something looks off on show day, it can be hard to know what is wrong. Whereas if you know you've just maintained high fluid, high sodium, you haven't really changed that, and then you're carbohydrate loaded because you've been eating like, I don't know, a great deal of carbs through the week, like a couple of days, maybe at your usual refeed carbohydrate intake at least. You know that the days if you're looking a bit flat, it's probably fluid and salt, so just potentially have a bit more. So it makes that simpler as well, because they're what's having that acute change, whereas people will be like piling in, don't know, sweet potato, and that's like, well, that's not going to see your physique. It's not going to be assimilated and digested for like 48 hours. So yeah, that's
not only
something that helps.
But also on show day, a common thing that I see, and that is something that I've done in the past as well, because I didn't really critically think about it. I was always like saying, okay, you have now to eat every 2 to 3 hours and also get some rice cakes with some jelly on it. Thing is though, if that individual has never eaten that way, let's just assume that individual barely eats something for breakfast, right? And they have their biggest meal on this later half of the day. Then all of a sudden making them eat 3 meals before actually stepping on stage that are very high in carbohydrates, and then in between those meals even sometimes having some snacks like have a rice cake. What do you think will happen to that individual? Do you really think that they will first and foremost feel great and have a good time? No, it's probably going to stress them out. Also there, I really do think that if you can create an environment for your athlete that is as little or as unstressful for them as possible, that's the best thing that you can do. So if it's kind of feels like just a typical day for them, I just have to assume that it's better than trying those fancy peak week protocols. I know where those fancy peak week protocols come from. And I also know that for some people who really have it nailed down, it really works well. But because those peak weeks mostly come from the enhanced realm where you can manipulate the variables, especially like water, massively, of course, it has a much higher impact. But for natural athletes, once again, the reward is very, very minimal, but the risk is super high. And there are so many ways that you can increase the risks, and I don't think it's worth it. And if you just make them have a very, very unstressful time, you just like, what did you have to, or what did you eat like a couple of days prior to that? Did you feel good with that? Continue doing that. Something like that, I think, is way more to go. And then you can still like, all right, if you still want to have something or you feel flat or so, then have a little snack in between. But other than that, keep things relatively the same. That's just my philosophy right now. And once again, the same as you, I'm willing to change things. But I think creating an environment that is just relaxing is probably the best bet.
Yeah, it's the same with even like I used to be quite militant about getting rid of sweeteners and like, oh, but that means like no protein powders. You change your supplementation, not having your pre-workout anymore. Maybe you're having like, it changes your hydration, and even some of the sweetened like beverages like a Monster has 1 gram, I think, of salt in it, maybe sodium, 1 gram of salt. It's like, if you start changing all these variables again, like
it's 1 gram exactly to the T.
So that's why I'm like, well, if you find it bloats you or you get discomfort, sure, like taper them out. But if you're feeling great with a Monster in your diet, I have a Monster on fucking show day. Like you're used to having that. If it really bloats you and you find it to cause a problem, don't have it. But like you said there, I'm so the same way. I'm like, look peaked before peak week and you're going to look fucking amazing on show day. Yeah. Whereas if you try and change too much, that's where, again, show day can really mess people up. That's like having, I don't know, people have alcohol and stuff. I think that's come from the enhanced side as well. It's like, you haven't drank alcohol for 6 months. Like, what do you think this is going to do? Yeah. Hopefully nothing.
And I don't know. I find it fascinating to some extent, but I also find it weird because I was under the same misconception at some point, simply because I didn't really take the time to think about it, because I never questioned those approaches. I was just like, why would we do something like that? At some point I thought like this, like, why would we do something like that? And I couldn't really come up with a proper answer, because many of those approaches don't really make a lot of sense, especially when they are deviating completely from the mean. So basically what it is that you're commonly or usually doing on a daily business. And why would you do that? Don't you want to actually, because we know from just day-to-day living that we as people, we function well on a certain routine, and people get stressed when the routine isn't the way that they intended to or they planned it to. And why should it be any kind of different in a peak week? And why do people then force any kind of change when in reality it just causes a lot of stress, anxiety, and like, have I nailed it? Have I done it correctly? Oh shit, what happens now? Uncertainty, everything comes into play then. And I never really understood it. In the first place, I never questioned it, even though that I didn't really understand it. And then at some point I questioned it and came to my own conclusion of like, it's idiotic to some extent.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
Yeah, it's the same with me. I can remember my first, or basically every previous season, Charlotte was like, you're way more relaxed this peak week. Like, for the last one, she hasn't really mentioned it this time because I guess I'm the same, but she was like, what's changed? I'm just like, I actually understand the process now. Whereas previously I never really understood. I just saw it was like, oh, you should do this. It's like someone saying, oh, you shouldn't eat carbs after 6. So I don't eat carbs after 6. It's like, but why are you doing that? It's like, oh, they said to do it. Yeah. Whereas you might stop eating carbs after 6 because you've eaten all your macros for the day of carbs. But now it's like, well, I know carbohydrates are the main thing that's going to impact my look through the week in terms of variables. And then on show day, it's going to be fluids. So make sure to drink enough. Make sure to salt my food as normal. Don't change anything too much that day. And you'll probably look pretty, like, do your warm up as if it's like warming up for your training session and then get on stage. And that's your workout right there. Yeah. And maybe you sweat a bit more than, you probably sweat a similar amount to your workout actually, and you probably excrete a similar amount of sodium. So then replace that. And then maybe you have an evening show. And yeah, once knowing that, it makes me way more confident as well with dealing with clients. So if they're like, oh, I saw someone having, I don't know, wine on show day, or they have, I don't know what it could be. It could be any old food or something that just seems like, and they ask like, why are you doing that? It's like coach said. So then they ask you and you're like, yeah, I can't think of a reason why you would be doing that. They might have their reasons. It might just be, this has worked in the past for me, which is also fine. It's a weak form of evidence, but it's evidence. Because I know all my shows, last time I competed, I did like a Subway pre-stage. I'd do like half a foot long, whatever, Subway. I had to go and source a Subway from somewhere, like buy a sub and eat it. It's like, why am I doing that? Why aren't I eating food I normally fucking eat? It's like, well, I read in Lane Norton's peaking manual that he said to have something like a salty Subway. So I had a salty Subway. Oh dear. Yeah. So yeah, it's from a confidence perspective of working with clients and myself now, like it's kind of embarrassing how long it's taken me to be so confident with it and understand the variables to such a degree. Because actually as a natural, it's so simple. You ask someone like Jared Feather, who's recently transitioned, he's like, peaking naturals is much more simple
Yeah.
than peaking enhanced guys, because there's so much more going on. So we make it unnecessarily complicated.
Yeah.
I think partly because a lot of the stuff we learn as bodybuilders comes from them. And then psychologically, we want something special because it's that week that everyone talks about.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Nothing more to say about that. And I'm sorry for everyone who's listening who's not really into contest prep or so. And the last shows always having been about contest prep. Thing is, Steve is prepping. It's that time of the year, especially this year. At the GmbF, there's a newcomer show that has been booked out, which is hardly ever the case. And that just shows me that a lot of people who planned in competing like last year, they probably compete this year alongside with the people who had planned anyway to compete this year as well. So that's why probably a lot of shows are just crammed at the moment. And yeah, it's just the time of the year. So sorry for the guys who aren't really into contest prep, but I hope that you're still having some kind of takeaways here. And the time will come very soon, actually, where then Steve is transitioning over to a contest prep, to an off season again, and then we are talking about other things.
Hopefully, there's at least people who appreciate like the science behind all of that and what that means, and they can get a feel for that. But that's very cool that that's filled out, because for the UK DFBA, I know there's only 3 people in my category, height category, unless they measure me taller than I am. And I'm a bit nervous that I'll be put into the tall class, because I'll be like, oh, fuck. I'll be the shortest in the tall class, but probably also the lightest and the smallest, because, they're normally beefcakes if they're like 6 foot plus.
Man, I have to get my shit together because I now turn 34, and otherwise I will end up in the
Masters,
in the Masters, about 40 for my first show. So I mean, I need to pick it up here.
Is it over 40s for Masters? I wasn't sure if it was 35.
Yeah, it's over 40s, and then every 10 years there's then the next class. So I need to actually step on my game here.
You want to step in as an open competitor. I think you probably could still, even if you're over 40, but you might just be like, no, I
think Jeff Alberts does that, doesn't he?
He goes open.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? I don't think there's too much else like going on for me particularly. It's interesting though that a lot of the elements of diet fatigue that we're referencing, they do dissipate when, like in a diet break, for example, which is basically what I'm doing right now. If you really think about it, I'm just increasing carbs, deloading kind of. A lot of the diet fatigue symptoms do dissipate. So like I'm hotter. Like last week I was quite cold all the time, much hotter. Irritability is definitely down. Energy levels are up. It's probably it's going to be short term, and the science kind of alludes to that. But it's nice to have a week where you feel that's again a stress reduction, just totally. And I know you've got one lined up, right?
Yes, 2 more days to go, and it's cool. It's cool because in the past because I never really had any kind of certain deadlines or so. I was just dieting for myself, and that's why sometimes it was like, all right, next week we're going to end the cutting phase, so why not end now? I'm already fairly lean, so let's stop it now. And I'm actually quite happy that I'm just sticking with it, like the plan that I laid out for myself this time. And then I'm going to take a diet break for a couple of days, probably just doing it for like 3 to 4 days, because in the past I've realized, I always found that when I'm having a diet break for longer, I'm having a harder time transitioning back. But this first took place like after like an entire week of a diet break, not so much after just like a couple of days or a refeed. That's why I try to keep it at around 3 to 4 refeed days, just to also same as you, have a little bit of a dissipation of the dietary fatigue. Even if it's just short term, it's still kind of, you're going out of the hot tub, so to speak, or out of the sauna, right into the cold, just to cool yourself down so that you can spend another 10 minutes in the sauna. And that's basically what I'm doing, just to cool off just shortly and get back into the heat again. That's where it's coming from, because I didn't really have a proper kind of refeed or diet break in a very long time. And I just feel that I am now at a point where I want to do this, also to gain a little bit more experience with that, play a little bit around again, see how I'm reacting now to it. Also applying, of course, my my own knowledge and the newly gained knowledge and experience over the past years, a month now, on that refeed that is about to come and happen. And then it's back to dieting, right?
And actually, something that recently made me think of this was a lot of people are now kind of poo-pooing refeeds and diet breaks. It's literally just a psychological aid. But hear me out. Digestion, I think may very well improve because you're putting more food through. So maybe your fiber's low or your food bulk's low. So that could help. I don't know. It might have some nice knock-on effects to how you feel. And then sleep. And sleep often improves a lot for people when they go through refeeds or diet breaks. And I can't help to think if you're having multiple nights of better sleep, that's going to have a knock-on effect to your physique outcomes. But it was just a thought that came through. I was just like, you know what? I hear this all the time that I'm just like, maybe you can't, it's not significant, but I reckon it will feel pretty good for at least a bit.
I could also see that there are other underlying mechanisms that we don't really even take into consideration. It must also be said, we've talked about it a couple of times, diet breaks or refeeds, they don't really work for everyone because many people have issues then in regards to controlling the hunger, going back to dieting again, etc., because probably also some of the physiological regulations that are taking place when you are consuming more calories. I think that everyone who has gone through a longer dieting phase or has gotten to a leaner point knows what it's like, that when you then eat a little bit more food, it could be that you're actually feeling much hungrier than when you are just in a caloric deficit, something like that, for example, and then still staying true to yourself and sticking with the kind of maintenance calories or whatever you set for yourself can be even more psychologically demanding. But at the same time, there are probably a couple of things that we don't even think about that may have a positive effect, because there must be something to it for those individuals who react very well to something like a refeed or a diet break. It can't just be, in my opinion, it can't just be psychological things. And human physiology may still be too complex for us to really consider all of the aspects that something like a refeed or a diet break can have on us.
And then it's often said, I think, that like body follows mind, or it's very hard to separate physiology from psychology because it inevitably has a knock-on effect. So yeah, it's just, I wouldn't throw them out just yet. And I think I've been on, like, I've always been like, probably both of us have been a bit on the fence with them. And I was definitely on like not pro refeed when for many years, and maybe a bit more pro diet break. And now I'm actually, both of them have come more to the middle. So I'm a little bit more pro refeed and a little less pro diet break. And I'm kind of like, and this is having a true kind of like evidence-based approach in that now I'm understanding both after I've applied them a lot and learned more about them. And it's like, I use them much more selectively rather than like every deload diet break, no refeeds when you're dieting. It's like, actually pick and choose. It's a tool.
Same for me, to be honest. Also, when it comes to my athletes, in the past, there was a time where I didn't do any kind of diet breaks or refeeds for any one of my athletes. Then there was a time where where I automatically prescribed it alongside the deloads. And now it's more like, okay, I really go down to the individual level. I listen to what they have to say before a diet, take into consideration for how long they've been dieting for, where my experience tells me, okay, a diet break could be beneficial now, or doesn't really make sense. Because, for example, when someone has just started their diet and one mesocycle is over, sorry, the chances are that you don't really need a diet break afterwards, after one mesocycle. You're not going to lose any kind of muscle mass. Your body fat percentage is still way too high. Dietary effects haven't really even kicked in yet, etc., etc. So too many reasons as to not take a diet break unless something comes up, some kind of event, personal stuff, or anything like that, or just like personal preference where you're saying like, I still want to take that. And I have my fair share with refeeds and diet breaks that then led me to actually have a much harder time after having incorporated them going back into a diet. And yet still here I am talking to you about it and being like, okay, I still haven't completely disregarded them, because I'm trying to find the nuance where and how I can implement them for myself and still benefits from the potential benefits of a refeed without compromising my entire journey.
Yeah, I think that's the key to being like evidence-based and a good coach. Like a quick example I can think of is like, I'm not a fan of overhead press. I very rarely program it, but I do program it sometimes because there are some situations I think it makes sense. And for some people, they just fucking love overhead press.
That's
so
true.
they want to do it. So it's, I'm really glad that we're in that zone, and I want our audience, that's where like you've got the education and the knowledge, but now you can apply it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I like people to get to.
Just on that note, Makoto, one of my athletes, he's now doing behind the head overhead pressing 3 times a week.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Let that sink for a moment. Both things. So overhead pressing is something that I kind of never really program, and especially not behind the head. And yet, here I have an athlete who's doing that 3 times per week. Yeah.
You're trying to break his shoulders. I'm joking.
That's what we are trying to accomplish. That's why we've programmed it.
Cool. I don't think we have anything else to pass by people particularly. Should we ask a question this time? We haven't asked a question in ages, have we?
Yeah. But I'm not prepared for that, to be honest.
I don't know if we've asked before, but
what do you think of Doc Brignol?
Oh God! Is there one person who keeps commenting that?
It's
or
not just one person.
Different?
It's like 2 people or so. And I have the feeling, at first, I really thought like, all right, let me take a look at him. But then it happened on a frequent basis, and not just on our YouTube channel, but on other YouTube channels as well, with nearly the same phrasing. And I was like, okay, this sounds like a spam bot. But it's very weird because that person is an actual individual who also was on the Powercast, I think it's called, from
Mark Bell.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think he has a spam bot. He has probably a marketing team, I just like to call it, who's then going on different channels and just trying to promote him. But to be honest, that's not the way to do things. That's not the way to do business. That's a surefire to never come on the podcast, actually.
Yeah. It's very rare that if someone puts their face in front of us like that we end up bringing them on, because normally we both want to have known them, learned more about them, understand them, their philosophies, then they come on. It's not a case of like, someone could put their face in front of me, then I'll go away and do that, or we go away and do that. But I don't just bring someone on who I have no idea who they are. Like it's so, and yeah, doing it in a really pushy way is not a great way to do business. It's kind of like business coaches being like, I can make you loads of money. I can make you loads of money. It's like, I'll come to you. You don't keep pushing your face in front of me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, what do you want to say? Oh yeah, with the question.
So refeeds, diet breaks, do you use them? Do you not use them? And bonus, why? That would be cool to hear. What's your experience been?
That sounds very good. Yeah, absolutely. And then we can cover it a little bit more maybe on what people have to say the next time.
Yeah.
Just quickly go over it.
For sure. And guys, wish me luck. Well, it would have already happened. So maybe I'll have a photo with a trophy, first place, winner of the overall coming.
At some point, you actually need to build your own YouTube studio then behind you with all of the trophies.
It will happen.
Hopefully. Natural.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
We'll catch you soon. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.